Eliana stood at the corner of Rosewood Avenue, clutching her old handbag and smiling at every passing car. Her hands smelled faintly of onions and detergent from the cafe where she worked part-time. She wasn't ashamed. Work was work. Every morning, she waited for the same city bus that took her to her cleaning shift at St. Mary's Hospital. But today was special. It was Parents' Day at Clara's school. Eliana wore her best floral dress, the same one she'd worn to church every Easter for the past 5 years. Her hair, streaked with silver, was tied neatly in a bun. She carried a small lunchbox with Clara's favorite empanadas inside. Still warm. When she arrived, the schoolyard buzzed with polished cars and parents dressed in suits. Eliana felt small, invisible, until she saw her daughter. "Clara," she called, waving. Clara's face froze. Her friends, stylish, loud, turned to look at the woman calling her name. Eliana walked closer, holding the lunchbox like a peace offering. "I brought you your favorite, cariño." But Clara stepped back, her voice tight. "Mom, please don't shout. You're embarrassing me." The words struck harder than Eliana expected. The laughter of nearby students stung like tiny knives. Eliana forced a smile, pretending she didn't hear right. "I'm sorry, mi amor. Clara turned away, muttering to her friends. "She's just like that sometimes." Eliana stood frozen, her hand trembling. The lunchbox slipped slightly. No one noticed. Parents' Day went on, but Eliana couldn't focus. The teachers spoke proudly of family, respect, and roots. She kept her eyes down. By the time the bell rang, she was already walking toward the bus stop again, the empanadas still untouched. On the ride home, she stared out the window, trying not to cry. "Maybe she's just growing up," she told herself. "Maybe I'm being too sensitive." But deep down, something inside her, something proud, something once unbreakable, began to crack. The next morning, the house was quiet, too quiet. Eliana moved around softly, folding laundry that didn't need folding, scrubbing dishes that were already clean. She was trying to distract herself from the echo of her daughter's words. "You're embarrassing me." Those 3 words replayed in her mind like a cruel song. When Clara finally came out of her room, dressed for school, her eyes stayed glued to her phone. No good morning, no smile, just the soft tapping of her thumbs on the screen. Eliana hesitated. "Clara, I made you oatmeal, with cinnamon, just how you like it." Clara barely looked up. "I'm not hungry. I'll grab something on the way." Eliana forced a smile. "Oh, okay." She wanted to say, "I'm sorry," but for what? For loving her child in her own simple way, for not being rich, or polished, or modern enough. The thought burned inside her chest. Later that day, while sweeping the floor of the hospital hallway, Eliana overheard 2 nurses chatting. "My mom embarrassed me once at school," one said, "and now I'd give anything to have her back," replied the other. Their laughter faded into the sound of mops and footsteps, but those words lingered like a whisper in her soul. That night, Eliana sat on her bed, scrolling through the only social media app she used, Facebook. She saw a photo of Clara and her friends from Parents' Day. They all looked happy, standing in front of the banner. Eliana wasn't in the photo, not even in the background. A comment from one of the girls read, "Your mom didn't come," and Clara had replied, "She was busy, I guess." Eliana's heart sank. Her hands trembled as she turned off her phone. Busy? No, she was there. She was always there, just never seen. When Clara returned home, Eliana gently asked, "Why did you say I wasn't there?" Clara frowned. "Mom, please, it's not a big deal." I didn't want to explain everything. Everything. Like what? Eliana's voice cracked, but Clara didn't answer. She just rolled her eyes, heading for her room. Eliana stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door. Then she whispered to herself, "Maybe I've loved her too softly." She turned off the kitchen light and sat alone, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock. Each sound reminded her of how empty love can feel when it isn't returned. But she made a quiet promise that night, not to punish, not to scold, but to teach. One day, her daughter would understand what it means to be loved by someone who never stops trying. If this part touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next emotional of Eliana's story, where love, pride, and regret collide in unexpected ways. A week passed, and Clara's birthday was approaching. Eliana had always loved birthdays, hers and her daughter's, because they were small celebrations of life, of love, and of family. But this year, she wasn't sure if she should even try. After the Parents' Day incident, She felt like any effort might only embarrass her daughter further. Still, she couldn't ignore the tradition. Early in the morning, she quietly began baking a cake in her tiny sunlit kitchen. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon filled the room. She hummed softly, trying to push back the memory of Clara's harsh words. Her hands, worn from years of hard work, moved carefully, folding the batter and sprinkling sugar with a loving precision only a mother could muster. She wrapped the cake and a small, hand-knitted scarf, a gift she had worked on secretly for weeks, in bright paper. She hoped it would remind Clara that some things were worth more than money, effort, love, and time. When Clara returned home from school, Eliana greeted her with a warm smile. "Happy birthday, mi amor. I made you something." Clara glanced at the cake and the package, her expression a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "Mom, don't. I already have gifts from my friends." Eliana's chest tightened, but she didn't back down. "I know, but I wanted to do this, just for you." Clara muttered, "It's fine. You didn't have to." She grabbed the package and placed it on the table, clearly avoiding eye contact. That evening, Clara's friends arrived for a small party. Eliana tried to help serve drinks and snacks, but she stayed mostly in the background, letting the teenagers laugh and chatter. She watched Clara smile, hear her laugh, and realized the gap between them had never felt so wide. As the night went on, one of Clara's friends accidentally knocked the cake to the floor. Gasps filled the room. Clara froze, then turned toward her mother. Eliana's heart sank as she saw the tears welling up in her daughter's eyes. Without a word, Eliana hugged Clara tightly. "It's okay, mi amor. It's just a cake," she whispered. "I made it for you, but I'll make it again. Or maybe we can bake one together next time." Clara's lips quivered. She had never expected her mother to be so gentle, so understanding. For a moment, the teenage facade fell away. She realized the depth of care behind every gesture Eliana had made, even when she felt embarrassed. Later that night, after the friends left, Clara sat beside her mother. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. "Mama, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said before. I just..." Eliana held her hand, letting her daughter gather her thoughts. "It's okay. Me, I know growing up isn't easy, but words have weight." Clara finally looked up, her eyes shining with a mixture of guilt and gratitude. In that moment, Eliana saw a glimpse of hope, the first spark of understanding, the start of a bridge that had been broken for so long, and for the first time in days, Eliana allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her daughter would one day truly see her heart. It was a chilly Saturday morning when Eliana woke up to the smell of coffee brewing in the small kitchen. She had been feeling lighter since the birthday incident. Maybe things were beginning to change between her and Clara. But that morning, as she stepped into the living room, she felt her heart sink. Clara was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with an expression of pure boredom. On the table were stacks of glossy magazines and a designer catalog, a gift she had received from her friends. Eliana cleared her throat softly. "Good morning, mi amor. Did you sleep well?" Clara barely glanced up. "I don't want to go anywhere with you today, Mom. You'll just embarrass me." Eliana's hands tightened around the coffee mug. She had tried patience, understanding, and gentle guidance, but this was something else. "Clara," she said softly, "I only want to spend time with you. Just a few hours. We can go anywhere you like." Her daughter's response was cold, cutting. "Mom, you don't get it. You're so old-fashioned. I don't want people to see me with someone like you." Eliana felt a sharp pang in her chest. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was disrespect, layered with cruelty. She could have yelled, scolded, or stormed out, but she didn't. Instead, she took a deep breath, straightened her back, and looked Clara in the eye. "Clara, I see you, and I hear you, but words like that, they hurt," Eliana said calmly. "Do you know what I've done for you every single day of your life? The nights I stayed awake when you were sick, the meals I made, the dreams I saved for you." Clara rolled her eyes, impatient. "Mom, stop. You're embarrassing me again." Eliana's silence spoke louder than any words. She walked past her daughter, grabbed her handbag, and calmly said, "Fine, then maybe it's time for you to see what it's like to do things for yourself." She left the house, walking with quiet dignity to the nearby bakery. Hours passed, and when she returned, she found Clara waiting on the porch. Her expression was different this time, curious, uncertain. "I didn't mean it, Mom," Clara murmured. "I didn't know." Eliana knelt down to meet her eyes, her voice steady but tender. "Actions speak louder than words. And one day, you'll understand what respect and love really mean. Clara's shoulders slumped. For the first time, she realized that her mother's love was not just endless, it was unshakable. The realization sank in slowly, leaving her stunned and full of regret. That night, Eliana sat quietly, sipping her tea, smiling softly to herself. She knew the real lesson hadn't been delivered through words, but through calm strength, love, and dignity. And soon, Clara would kneel, not literally, but in the quiet regret and understanding of her own heart. If Eliana's strength touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow the next of this emotional story, where pride, humility, and love collide in ways you won't expect. The following week felt heavier than ever for Eliana. She noticed Clara avoiding her gaze at breakfast, muttering short replies, and leaving the house as soon as possible. It was clear the daughter's pride had not yet crumbled, but Eliana knew life had a way of teaching lessons when hearts were closed. That Friday, Eliana received a call from Mrs. Ramos, the principal at Clara's school. Her voice was gentle but urgent. "Mrs. Eliana, I'm afraid Clara was in an accident this afternoon. She's at the hospital, stable, but she needs you there immediately." Eliana's heart raced, her hands trembling as she grabbed her coat. She didn't waste a single second. The drive to the hospital was a blur, her mind running through every possible outcome, every what if. When she arrived, the waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and anxiety. Nurses were moving quickly in and out, while parents paced the hallways. And then she saw Clara, sitting on a stretcher, her ankle wrapped in a cast and tears streaking her cheeks. A small crowd of classmates hovered nearby, whispering apologies and concern, but Clara's eyes were fixed on the floor. Eliana rushed forward and knelt beside her daughter. "Clara, mi amor, I'm here." Clara tried to speak but only managed a choking whisper. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything I said." Eliana took her daughter's hand in hers, feeling the warmth and fragility all at once. She had endured the cruel words, the dismissals, the pride, but now it all fell away. The moment was raw, unfiltered, and perfectly human. "You don't need to say it, mi amor. I know you didn't mean it. What matters is that you learn. Love isn't always loud or perfect. It's quiet, patient, and constant." Eliana whispered. Clara's tears flowed freely, her head resting against her mother's shoulder. "I never realized how much you've done for me. I was so blind. I made you feel invisible." Eliana stroked her daughter's hair, holding her close. "You'll see, mi amor. It's never about being perfect. It's about being there for each other, no matter what." The hospital room was quiet except for their breathing. A nurse peeked in, seeing the mother and daughter hugging tightly, and smiled softly before walking away. In that room, all the past hurt, the insults, the pride, the distance, began to melt. Clara finally understood the value of patience, humility, and unconditional love. Later, when the doctor checked Clara's ankle, she laughed softly, still sniffling. "Mom, I promise, from now on, I'll never take you for granted." Eliana hugged her daughter tightly, feeling a surge of relief and pride. The journey had been long, and the pain real, but this moment of honesty, remorse, and reconciliation made every tear, every harsh word, and every lonely night worth it. For the first time in months, Eliana smiled without restraint. She knew that the hardest lessons often came wrapped in the most difficult moments, and that love, if patient enough, could overcome even the deepest wounds. A week after the hospital incident, Eliana decided it was time to teach Clara a lesson, not with anger, but with gentle wisdom and a subtle reminder of what truly matters. It was a Saturday morning, and the sun filtered softly through the kitchen windows. Eliana prepared a small basket, carefully packing it with essentials: sandwiches, water bottles, a thermos of tea, and a warm scarf she had knitted herself. She smiled quietly, thinking of how Clara often overlooked the simple things that came from love. "Clara," Eliana called gently from the doorway, "I have a little outing planned for us today." Clara, now fully recovered from her ankle injury, eyed the basket suspiciously. "Mom, what is it this time?" Eliana's smile was serene. "Just a little trip, trust me." They walked quietly to the local park. Children laughed on the swings, birds chirped in the trees, and the air smelled faintly of flowers and freshly cut grass. Eliana led Clara to a small bench near a pond, where ducks waddled curiously. "Mom, why are we just sitting here? Everyone else goes shopping, or to fancy places," Clara murmured, a hint of old impatience in her voice. Eliana looked at her daughter and said softly, "Clara, this bench, these ducks, this quiet, it's everything. Life isn't always about fancy gifts or being seen. True happiness comes from noticing the little things and appreciating them. Clara frowned. She still didn't fully understand, but as they sat together, Eliana began to tell stories about her childhood, the struggles her own mother had endured, and the countless little sacrifices made for her family. Each story was full of laughter, tears, and lessons wrapped in love. Hours passed. Clara listened, initially distracted, but gradually drawn in by the sincerity in her mother's voice. She began to see her mother not as someone outdated or embarrassing, but as a woman who had faced life's hardships quietly, patiently, and with unshakable dignity. Finally, Eliana reached into the basket and handed Clara a small, handwritten journal. Here, she said, write down things you notice each day, things that bring you joy, or that you're grateful for. It can be little, or it can be big. Just remember to see them, and to honor the people who help you notice them. Clara's eyes softened. She flipped through the first page slowly, then looked at her mother. Mom, I think I finally understand. I've been so blind, I didn't see all you've done. I'm sorry for everything I said. Eliana hugged her daughter tightly, feeling the warmth and sincerity that only comes from genuine realization. Mi amor, apologies are just words. Understanding, love, and gratitude, those are what mattered. As the sun began to set, mother and daughter walked home hand in hand, a quiet bond forming that neither words nor pride could break. Clara had learned her lesson, the kind that stays with a person forever. If Eliana's quiet strength and Clara's awakening touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow the next of this emotional story, where pride, regret, and love reach their unforgettable climax. It was a Friday afternoon when Clara's world suddenly tilted. The school had organized a charity event, and she had volunteered mostly to impress her friends, who praised her for being so generous. But things didn't go as she had planned. The event took place in the community center, a place Clara had rarely noticed before. She had expected polished facilities, bright decorations, and selfies with everyone watching. Instead, she was greeted by peeling paint, worn-out tables, and children from underprivileged families, whose faces carried stories of struggle she had never imagined. Clara's friends laughed nervously at the small, chaotic setup, whispering about how awkward it all seemed. Clara felt embarrassed, her cheeks heating up. She looked down at the volunteer folder in her hands, suddenly aware that she had no idea what she was supposed to do. Just then, she saw her mother standing near the food table. Eliana's hands were busy, arranging sandwiches, filling water bottles, and speaking gently to the children, making each one feel seen and valued. Her face was calm, her smile effortless, and yet commanding respect. Clara froze. She watched as her mother knelt to tie a child's shoelaces, offered extra sandwiches to those who hadn't eaten, and comforted a little boy whose tears refused to stop. No one laughed at her, no one mocked her. Instead, the room seemed brighter, warmer, because of her presence. Clara felt a strange, unfamiliar pang in her chest. Pride, vanity, and embarrassment all collided with something deeper, humility. She realized that the love and care her mother had given, day after day, were far greater than anything money, status, or appearances could provide. Clara approached cautiously, trying to make herself useful. Mom, can I help? She asked, her voice almost trembling. Eliana looked up, eyes shining. Me and more, of course. Just follow your heart. Together, they moved through the room. Clara served food, helped children find their seats, and offered smiles where they were most needed. The more she gave, the lighter her heart felt. She realized that her mother's quiet life, the simple, patient, tireless care she had always taken, was far more powerful than any material display or social approval she had once valued. By the end of the day, as the children waved goodbye with full bellies and happy hearts, Clara turned to her mother. Tears brimmed in her eyes, unashamed and raw. Mom, I understand now. I was so blind. I laughed at you, mocked you, and yet, you've always been the strongest person I know. I'm sorry for everything. Eliana hugged her daughter tightly. Mi amor, it's never too late to learn. What matters is that your heart finally sees. Pride fades, but love endures. For the first time, Clara felt genuine respect and admiration, not because of wealth or appearances, but because of the unseen sacrifices and unwavering strength of her mother. That day marked a turning point, a moment of humility that would never leave her heart. It had been months since the Parents' Day incident, the birthday mishap, and the hospital scare. Clara had grown in ways that only experience, humility, and reflection could teach. But the final lesson came unexpectedly in the quiet of a simple evening at home. Eliana was in the kitchen, preparing a modest dinner. The smell of sautéed vegetables and fresh bread filled the small apartment, comforting in its simplicity. Clara stood at the doorway, shifting from foot to foot, her hands twisted nervously, and her eyes avoided meeting her mother's gaze. "Mom, can we talk?" Clara finally whispered. Eliana wiped her hands on her apron, her heart steady. "Of course, me, amor. Sit down." Clara lowered herself into a chair, staring at the table. I've been thinking about everything. How I treated you, how I laughed at you, embarrassed you, ignored you." Her voice faltered. Eliana nodded gently, letting her daughter speak without interruption. "I didn't understand what it meant to work so hard, to love someone so quietly, and to be there even when I didn't deserve it. I can't even look you in the eye after everything I said." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. She had never spoken with such raw honesty, such humility. For the first time, she realized the depth of her mother's patience. The endless nights Eliana had spent worrying, working, and loving her without expecting recognition. Eliana reached across the table, taking her daughter's hands in hers. "Clara, you can look at me now. It's okay. Me, amor. I never wanted you to feel guilty. I only wanted you to learn that love is stronger than pride, and patience is greater than anger." Clara lifted her gaze slowly. Her eyes, once filled with defiance and embarrassment, now shimmered with regret, understanding, and love. I see it now, Mom. I'm sorry for everything. I promise I'll never take you for granted again." Eliana smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her daughter's face. "That's all I ever wanted. Your heart to understand what words can't always explain." For the first time in months, they hugged without hesitation, a silent apology and forgiveness passing between them. Clara rested her head on her mother's shoulder, and in that moment, all the hurt, pride, and misunderstandings seemed to dissolve. The bond that had been tested was now unbreakable. That night, Eliana watched her daughter prepare for bed and realized that love, patience, and dignity had triumphed. Clara had finally learned that humility and gratitude were worth more than any social approval, and that the quiet strength of a mother was a force no pride could ever overshadow. In the end, it wasn't the gifts, the lessons, or the words, it was the unwavering love that had made her daughter kneel in understanding, respect, and heartfelt regret. If Eliana's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories that show the power of love, patience, and family.